Welcome to 536 AD. That's the moment humanity collectively decided the apocalypse had finally arrived. And you know what? They had every reason to think so. History is full of moments where everything goes sideways. But 536 set a bar for horror that hasn't been beaten since. Harvard historian Michael McCormick doesn't mince words. He straight up calls it the worst time to be alive in the history of our species. Picture this. You wake up and the sun just broke. In March 536, a weird fog settled over huge chunks of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Not that morning mist that burns off by noon. This stuff was dry, thick, and terrifyingly persistent. It basically turned off the sun for 18 months. Byzantine historian Procopius left some creepy notes. The sun gave off light without brightness, like the moon 24/7. Imagine living in a year-and-a-half-long twilight zone. Day just never happened. The disk in the sky hung there, but it offered no heat, no shadows at noon. It looked like an eclipse that forgot to end. Nobody knew what was happening. Priests prayed. Regular folks just waited for the end credits. And this wasn't just poetic drama. Summer temps in Europe tanked by 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius. Sounds small? For 6th century farming, that was a death sentence. It kicked off the coldest decade in 2,300 years. Nature ran a global crash test on us, and we failed hard. We only cracked the mystery recently, thanks to glaciers. A team led by McCormick and Paul Niewski drilled into the Col Nefedi Glacier in the Alps and pulled up a core from 72 meters down. Ice is the perfect archive. In a layer from spring 536, they found microscopic shards of volcanic glass, tephra. Chemistry doesn't lie. This glass came from Iceland. The puzzle pieces fit. Somewhere up north, a monster woke up. The eruption was so massive, it blasted millions of tons of ash and sulfur into the stratosphere. This sulfur shield wrapped around the northern hemisphere and started bouncing sunlight back into space. Iceland literally pulled the plug on the civilized world. We used to blame a volcano in El Salvador, but now it's clear. The hit came from the north, which is why Europe got slammed so fast. Lush lands turned into a deep freeze. Catastrophe is putting it mildly. Let's hop over to China, August 536. It's snowing. Summer was just canceled. Rice crops died under snowdrifts. Chinese chronicles from that era read like a horror script. Grand cold and famine. The Tang records mention yellow dust falling from the sky like snow. That was the volcanic ash traveling thousands of miles. People died by the millions. In some provinces, 75% of the population was wiped out. The Northern Wei dynasty collapsed because when the emperor can't feed the people, the throne means nothing. Hunger riots tore everything apart. In Korea, it was a hellish mix of storms and floods, followed by a brutal drought. Nature seemed to lose its mind, blending all the seasons into one cold, muddy mess. What about Europe? Irish monks, usually pretty reserved, left terrifyingly short entries in their annals. A failure of bread. The annals of Ulster confirm, from 536 to 539, food just didn't exist. The earth stopped giving. We checked the tree rings of Irish oaks. In 536, they just stopped growing. The trees stood frozen, waiting for warmth that never came. People started eating things they never looked at before. Lichen, moss. In Scandinavia, they invented bread made of bark. They'd strip pine trees, dry the inner layer, grind it, and mix it with whatever flour scraps they had. It filled the stomach, but it had zero nutrients, just an illusion of fullness before starvation. In Britain, the climate was the worst in a century. By the way, the legends of King Arthur's death are often tied to this specific period. Gloom, plague, the end of an era. In Scandinavia, the fear was so primal that people started buying salvation from the gods. Archaeologists are finding massive hoards of gold buried right in the mid-16th century. These weren't savings accounts. They were desperate bribes to the divine. Elites buried everything they owned just to bring the sun back. Scientists are pretty sure this real-life nightmare birthed the myth of Fimbulwinter, the great winter before Ragnarok. 3 years without summer. For those people, Ragnarok wasn't a fairy tale. It was reality right outside their window. Whole regions in Sweden and Norway were abandoned. Gold lost its value. You couldn't eat it. The shockwave hit the south too. Mesopotamia got snow that killed the crops. Arabia got the opposite. Pressure changes triggered catastrophic floods. The Great Dam of Marib in Yemen, an engineering marvel of the ancient world, couldn't hold. It had watered the kingdom of Saba for centuries, but freak storms destroyed it. Lush gardens turned to swamps, then to desert. It forced a massive migration of Arab tribes northward. Historians think this collapse of the Old World cleared the path for the rise of Islam. Old gods couldn't stop the water or the hunger. People needed new answers. Meanwhile, in Constantinople, Emperor Justinian was playing Make Rome Great Again. He was burning cash on wars in Italy and Africa. But the empire's backbone was snapping. No taxes, ruined farmers, grain prices in the stratosphere. A text from that time says, "A handful of gold wouldn't buy a handful of grain." And just as the empire wobbled, nature fired a kill shot. 540 AD. Another eruption, probably in the tropics. The cold lingered. Then, in 541, rats carrying plague arrived in the Egyptian port of Pelusium. This was the first pandemic of bubonic plague, the plague of Justinian. People, weak from years of eating tree bark, dropped like flies. In Constantinople, at the peak, 10,000 people died a day. Funerals? Forget it. They dumped bodies in the sea, or stuffed them into empty towers. Byzantium lost half its population. Justinian's dreams of a reunited empire collapsed along with the ancient economy. Across the ocean, the Americas weren't spared. Mexican cave stalagmites tell us about a brutal drought. The Maya faced a water crisis. Pyramid construction stopped. Cities emptied. In Peru, the Moche civilization got hit with climatic whiplash. 30 years of mega floods from a super El Nino, followed by 30 years of bone-dry drought. Their canals, their pride and joy, turned to dust. Priests who promised good weather lost all authority. It turned into a battle royale for food. Archaeologists aren't finding temples. They're finding fortifications and smashed skulls. The whole world turned into a fight for survival. McCormick believes 536 kicked off the late antique Little Ice Age. It lasted over a century, until 660, the European economy went comatose. Greenland ice shows lead pollution, a marker for silver mining, dropped to flat zero. No trade, no coins. Just barter and survival in the woods. It wasn't until the 640s that mining started up again. It was a century of darkness. Why is 536 scarier than other dates? Look, the Black Death in 1347 wiped out a third of Europe, but the climate was stable. The Spanish flu in 1918 killed millions, but we had medicine and the end of a war. But 536? That was a combo breaker. Global cooling, no sun, total famine, and then a plague. No antibiotics, no weather apps, no understanding of volcanoes. For them, it was just the inexplicable wrath of gods, a winter that wouldn't end. Even today, that kind of temperature drop in 18 months of twilight would bring our civilization to its knees. In the 6th century, it was practically game over. Interestingly, modern historians like Lee Mordecai try to find silver linings, saying life went on, or that some parts of Arabia got more rain. But let's be honest, for 99% of the population, it was hell on earth. Laser analysis of ice and tree rings don't lie. They paint a picture of a world cracking at the seams. 536 is a harsh reminder. We depend on a thin layer of atmosphere and one yellow star. If the sun hides behind ash, your Bitcoin stocks and armies won't save you. Back then, people ate dandelion roots and nettles. In China, it came down to cannibalism. In Ireland, they gnawed on seaweed, but even the ocean betrayed them. The cold changed fish migration patterns. Life became nothing but a calorie hunt. Festivals vanished, replaced by rituals of despair. Human pride was trampled by the planet itself. We often act like we own the earth, but 16th century history whispers in our ear, "You're just tenants." And the landlord can cut the power anytime. The fact that we're here discussing this is pure luck. Our ancestors survived a bottleneck, a world that almost ceased to exist. They made it. And that is perhaps the only good news from the year 536.